It's been a long time since this town rang with the sound of turn-of-the-century trains. They carried people and cargo from here in Clarkdale to Drake, some 38 miles away. Those were the days of cowboys and Indians, and Arizona had just become the 48th state in the Union. You might not think there's much of a story to a couple of small towns and a 38-mile railroad, except that one of those towns was the third largest city in the territory of Arizona at one time. And that same railroad now carries thousands of visitors every year over those same tracks laid down by people we now call pioneers. I'm Ken Michael, and I'm your host on this train ride back through time. We've got nearly a century to cover, so get comfy, take off your shoes, and don't try to beat me to the dining car. When you want to get away from your worries and your woes, head up to the valley where the Verde River flows. Head on up to Clarkdale below the Copper Queen. You'll find the prettiest little railroad that you've ever seen. Arizona Central Railroad Line. Get your ticket, all aboard, we're leaving right on time. Red Rock Canyons and clear mountain skies. Arizona Central Railroad Line. When you need to take a break from the Valley of the Sun, the Northland is waiting, come on up, have some fun. Round 'em up and head 'em out, it isn't very far. You'll be rolling by the river on a railroad car. Arizona Central Railroad Line. Get your ticket, all aboard, we're leaving right on time. Red Rock Canyons and clear mountain skies. Arizona Central Railroad Line. Jerome, Arizona. As good a place as any to begin this story. In 1876, the billion-dollar copper camp was a mere 10 mining claims, a mill site, some men, some mules, and the nearest railroad was Colorado. But times changed, as they have a way of doing. And in a few short years, the United Verde Copper Company had bought out the claims and put up a smelter in these black mountains of central Arizona. Then, after a financial panic had closed down the mines, Senator William A. Clark of Montana, an enterprising fellow, optioned a majority of stock in the United Verde Copper Company, and Jerome was off and running. The good senator from Montana had more than a business interest in railroads, being the proud owner of a Pullman Palace, his 73-foot private railway car, named 2001, complete with 2 sleeping compartments, a dining room for 12, and quarters for his staff of 3. But it was, in fact, the business of mining that set the stage for this railroad.
Senator Clark, who owned the United Verde Copper Company in Jerome, had to have a new site for a smelter for his operation up there, mainly because the old smelter site was directly over the ore body, and his geologist informed him that it was necessary to remove that smelter in order to get at that ore body. So he started looking around for a place to locate a smelter. He decided on the area that later became Clarkdale, and he built the smelter site here. However, in order to build that smelter and build the town of Clarkdale, he had to have means of getting material and men in here to do the job. So he commissioned the Santa Fe, Prescott, and Phoenix Railroad to build a line for him from Drake, which was a point on their line 38 miles away that led into Clarkdale. In October
1911, the Santa Fe started grading for the Verde Valley Railroad. Now, Senator Clark financed this road, and the Santa Fe built it. This was one way Clark got things done. He would guarantee traffic or guarantee mileage, guarantee revenue for the railroad then, and they had the courage then to go ahead and build it.
They did the job for him at his expense now at about $1.25 million. And it took them just a little over a year to complete the line, which was quite a task in those days, especially when you consider that it took 250 men and 200 mules to do the job.
The Jerome Mining News on October 10th, 1911 stated, "The dream of the pioneer when he first set foot in the sun-kissed Verde Valley, the hopes of all the Jeromites expressed in years past and present, is now about to be realized. For dirt has begun to fly on the new railroad." This, fellow readers, means a big boom for Jerome and the Verde Valley. These were exciting times, and this was surely the place to be, the garden spot of the new state, the hub of the universe. The town of Clarkdale was laid out in December of 1911, and the Mining News reported, "The Clarkdale Depot will be located a few hundred feet north of the bridge across Bitter Creek, leading to the new town. The only indication of the coming of the town of Clarkdale proper is the boulevard, which has been graded and which will be the main or business street of the town."
The station here in Clarkdale was built someplace between 1912 and 1914 when the railroad was first in operation. And that was quite an elaborate place, and it had a telegrapher's window. It burned in the 1930s because an adjoining coal bin had a lot of dust in it. The wind came up, and apparently somebody walking by flicked a cigarette, and there was enough coal dust from that wind that it ignited the pile and burned the depot down. Then they built another depot that was here until after the railroad was, or until after the smelter was closed, and they no longer had a need for a depot agent here. Then the railroad disposed of the building.
The other end of the 38-mile track was Cedar Glade, south of Ash Fork, which was renamed Drake for W.A. Drake, who was then chief engineer for the Santa Fe, Prescott, and Phoenix. But a station was also constructed in Perkinsville, what is now the end of the line for the Verde River Canyon Railroad.
They built a depot up there that was used for some time as a depot, but mainly it was used as a schoolhouse. I've personally talked to 2 or 3 women that taught school there in the 1920s.
One of the biggest challenges in building the railroad was the construction of the tunnel. The work was begun at the tail end of 1911 and completed the following year.
In places, the river and the railroad share space in the canyon just a few feet apart, and a tunnel was required in order to make a turn around a sharp promontory, and this is the only tunnel on this line. It's about 5 miles east of Perkinsville.
The construction of the tunnel was interesting because it was contracted for by a Swedish firm from Sweden, and they brought their own 25 men over here from Sweden to do the job. They came into Jerome in 1911 on the narrow gauge line that ran from Jerome Junction to Jerome. They then took the wagon road up to Perkinsville, and then of course came down from Perkinsville to the tunnel site to do the job. And supposedly it took them about 6 months to complete it. And now that's without any equipment, because back in those days they just didn't have bulldozers and that sort of thing to work with. So it was a matter of just blasting out the tunnel and then hauling the material out with their mules. The workers that built the line, of course, couldn't commute daily from Jerome. They had to live right along the line, and so all along the track There's hardly any evidence of it today, but there were camps as they progressed, and they would move from one site to another. And even today, you can find pots and pans and relics of their having lived there along the track.
There's a lot of old lanterns, purple glass. One of my buddies found a 1922 50-cent piece laying up beside the tracks. It was just as coal black as it'd been there a long time. Find a lot of old gray ware, coffee pots and things, old bedsteads. Every time I walk out there and find an old bottle that's got 1915 on it, or an old insulator that's got May the 2nd, 1893 on it, why, it brings back what these people had to go through when they built this thing in here in the days when they had to have a mule and a drag instead of a bulldozer.
Through winter snows and spring rains, the men toiled and labored, and rail by rail the track was laid, over a river and through a canyon. The 20th century had arrived in central Arizona. The railroad that is in use today was sold by the Santa Fe to the Arizona Central Railroad in 1988. It hauls materials for the Phoenix Cement Plant 38 miles between Clarkdale and Drake, where it connects with the Santa Fe line. It also provides popular scenic excursions through the Verde River Canyon, which runs between Clarkdale and Perkinsville. Just outside of Perkinsville, the railroad joins the Verde River, the only large perennial stream in the region. It has cut a gorge in the underlying rock as it twists and turns for 20 miles to the Clarkdale area. This rugged high desert country is inaccessible for most vehicles. However, the railroad snuggles closely along the southern wall of this spectacular canyon, following the river's course below crimson cliffs and the dramatic formations of stratified limestone and basalt. The scenery is sure pretty. But the history in these parts is just as interesting, so let's get back to it.
The train that ran daily while the mines were and the smelter was in operation. It was called the Verde Mix. And it was a very small train, but it was just what the name implies, a mix. It was a mixture of passengers and freight coming in, and of course going out, it was mainly copper ingots that were being shipped out to the refinery. But it played a very important part in the history because it was the one means of communication that you could count on in and out of the valley. But there wasn't a regular passenger car, it was just a caboose, kind of an oversized caboose, and the people were allowed to ride in that with the conductor.
I can remember riding this train in 1948 and 49. When it was a steam engine, had a little red caboose. I was about 13 years old, and my dad worked here at the copper smelter here for Phelps Dodge, and the ore came down from the old Jerome mine. Every day, they went out from 7 o'clock in the morning and came back at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. It cost 50 cents to go as far as the mouth of Sycamore Creek. There we'd swim, fish, hunt arrowheads, and everything boys used to like to do. And the conductor would always tell us, you boys be here at 2:30 or you're left. And we always managed to make the train, didn't ever have to walk back. We didn't have a watch, but they always blew the whistle for us about a mile or so up the tracks.
And I've heard the story told that a lot of the early day ranchers' wives, if they didn't have time to come into town, would just go up to along the railroad track, flag down the train, hand the engineer her grocery list, and then when they got into town, someone from the train crew would go fill the order and then take it back on the way back up later on. And it made a real convenient way for people to be connected with the outside world.
From the train, one can still see the ruins of the Sinagua Indians who lived in the region until 700 A.D. These cliff dwellers disappeared suddenly. Though whether from drought, disease, or warring tribes, no one knows. They were followed centuries later by the Hohokam, and for a while the Verde River and Sycamore Canyon area were trade routes for the Hohokam and their neighbors from over the Black Hills. Meanwhile, back at the railroad, tracks and ties were linking isolated ranchers with the booming town of Clarkdale. And so here we are, the 1990s, nigh on to 100 years since the first spike was driven through the first tie and rail that was laid. Even so, this wilderness area has been well preserved. You don't need to stretch your imagination too far to imagine just what those early civilizations and western pioneers might have seen here.
No matter how many times you've been up it, you see something new every time, a new formation. It changes with the seasons. In the fall, it turns to gold, the cottonwoods and the sycamores and the great ones, it all turns to red and gold. It's beautiful. In the winter time, well, you can look forward to seeing the bald eagles come in. We got about 8 that winter up here every year. When we go out early in the morning, well, we see lots of deer, javelina, and we've seen antelope just out of town here. It's always something to see, just beautiful. Still the same up there. The grapevines are still in the trees, and the water's still clear, and it's still full of fish. And sometimes I'm working up on the track, and I'd like to go back and be 13 and have the old Verde Megs come by and pick me up again.
A ride on the railroad today is a journey back through hundreds of years of history. People today ask me which side of the train they should ride on, the left side or the right side, and I tell them the best side is the outside. You don't want to miss a thing. want to get away from your worries and your woes, head up to the valley where the Verde River flows. Head on up to Clarkdale below the Copper Queen. You'll find the prettiest little railroad that you've ever seen. Arizona Central Railroad line. Get your tickets all aboard. We're leaving right on time through Red Rock Canyons and clear mountain skies. Arizona Central Railroad line. When you need to take a break from the valley of the sun, the Northland is waiting. Come on up, have some fun. Round 'em up and head 'em out, it isn't very far. You'll be rolling by the river on a railroad car. Arizona Central Railroad line. Get your tickets all aboard, we're leaving right on time through Red Rock Canyons and clear mountain skies. Arizona Central Railroad line. Get your tickets all aboard, we're leaving right on time through Red Rock Canyons and clear mountain skies. Arizona Central Railroad line. All aboard, we're leaving right on time through Red Rock Canyons and clear mountain skies. Arizona Central Railroad line. Look over yonder and what do you see? Arizona Central, she's picking up speed. Long steel rails and short cross ties. Clarkdale to Perkinsville one more time. Arizona Central Railroad line. Get your tickets all aboard, we're leaving right on time through Red Rock Canyons, clear mountain skies. Arizona Central Railroad line. Springtime flowers are growing all along. Summer we're watching the does get grow strong. In the fall how the color will delight the eye. All winter long watching eagles fly. Arizona Central Railroad line. Get your tickets all aboard, we're leaving right on time through Red Rock Canyons, clear mountain skies.